Everybody's trying to make interpersonal connections. Whether that's in class, work, or we're just trying to make friends, it's human nature to want to connect with other people. However, for some of us like myself, we aren't as cool as the Fonz was, and we may need a little bit of help knowing how to build these interpersonal relationships or friendships. But how do we go about this? According to Erwin Altman and Dalmas Taylor's social penetration theory, we have to treat each other like onions.
Layers! Onions have layers. Ogres have layers. Onions have layers?
Not exactly like that, but kind of close. Altman and Taylor state that the things that we are willing to self disclose or tell others about ourselves come in layers, similar to that of an onion. Each time we peel back a layer, we get to know one another on a more personal level, creating a stronger interpersonal bond. Altman and Taylor state that there are 6 different levels to our self disclosure onion, starting with biographical information, then preferences, followed by goals and aspirations, then religious convictions, followed by deeply held fears and fantasies, and finally, concept of self. As you can see, on the outer layer of the onion are things like biographical information, are things that you can talk about really casually, and it doesn't take knowing someone very much to discuss. But as we get deeper into the onion, things like religious convictions, deeply held fears and fantasies, and concept of self are things that you need to get to know someone pretty well before you start talking about. You can't just go up to someone and ask them what their concept of self is and expect to be able to have a normal conversation. According to this theory, the more we self disclose to one another, the stronger these relationships will become. However, there are a few guidelines to the ways that we self disclose to one another. These self disclosures need to be gradual, orderly, and reciprocal. But what exactly does that look like? To start, self disclosure should be gradual. It should never feel like a drag race, but more like a nice, easy drive. You don't want to tell someone everything about yourself the first time you meet them. If you go too fast, you might make the other person uncomfortable. This is called over disclosing. I'm sure many of us can think of a time when we met someone for the first time and they told us way too much information. If you're anything like me, it made you feel a little uncomfortable. As we disclose, we should make sure to take it slow. Second, self-disclosures should be orderly. You can't start with the inner layers of an onion and work your way out. You have to work your way from the outside in the more you get to know each other. This can be referred to as breadth and depth. Breadth is the range of topics you're able to talk about, and depth is how deep you're able to talk about these topics. You have to be able to read into the relationship and know what topics are fair game and how deeply you can talk about them. You need to start with basics like what's your name, where are you from, or what are you studying, and then you can gradually work into the deeper parts of the onion the more you get to know one another. And finally, it needs to be reciprocal. It has to be a two-way street. If you're only asking questions, it'll feel like the other person's being interrogated and they'll want to leave the conversation. For this model to work, both parties must be disclosing. A good way to get the ball rolling is to self-disclose first. While this requires you to be a little bit vulnerable, it makes other people feel more comfortable to reciprocate and disclose about their own selves. On the flip side, if you're the only one disclosing information, you will make the other person uncomfortable. So you need to make sure it's a two-way street for this model to work. So, in conclusion, if you make sure that the way you self-disclose and work through the 6 layers of self-disclosure are gradual, orderly, and reciprocal, you're on the path to making a lot of friends and being as cool as the Fonz was.